Contained within, the chronicle of a failure so profound it resembled victory. On the third night of the third week of the rites of the dancing shadows, the great imperial quest was pronounced concluded. His Majesty's emissaries have visited palaces where succession is determined by geometry rather than genealogy, shrines consecrated to the great Rathdos, and duchies where ornamental complexity determined political hierarchy. But there was the report of the Emperor's most trusted advisor that rendered all such pursuits obsolete. It had been 3 years since the great schism between the theosoph of thought and the mystagogue of mind. The theosoph held that thoughts created the self. The mystagogue insisted on the reverse. As the empire erupted in fractious debate, His Majesty commanded the two to scour foreign realms for resolution. The court had since been mesmerized by reports which arrived weekly of fantastical lands and paradoxical theorems, which each sectarian claimed furthered their own position. But no word had arrived in 6 months' time, following the intention, independently declared by each retinue, to visit the Order of Ouroboros. The royal archivist uncovered but a single reference to the order, a correspondence of quite some vintage. Contained within was the portrait of a most peculiar sect. It was said the order had constructed their temple according to blueprints drafted in musical notation. They inscribed their laws as botanical arrangements, and their geometric proofs were decipherable only through ritual dance. The order's founder had been an evangelical logician of the Bourbaki Creed. Upon ministering to a people with no knowledge of logical connectives, she reconfigured her sacred theorems into numerical representations. To her astonishment, she found that if she performed calculations upon these numbers, the result, when translated into logic, would generate valid theorems. Her discovery aroused the excitement of geometers and numerologists alike as the ranks of her disciples swelled. They believed they had found the perfect system to prove all that was provable. They determined to construct a registry of all true statements, decoding axioms and incantations alike. As they neared completion, they engraved upon the threshold, "This registry contains all true statements," a misstep of terrible import. An Epimenidean, whose admission to the order was quite controversial, observed that were the engraving true, it belonged inside, making the registry incomplete, and the statement false. But if false, it need not be included, making it true again. The logician responded with a codex for the universal governance of her system, including a ban on any statement referencing itself. To recognize her achievement, the Epimenidean announced he would inscribe in the registry, "All and only provable statements follow the rules of this codex," a statement, he added, which his most esteemed founder had proven indisputably true. The registrar applied the codex to the statement, only to find a heinous profanity. If the statement was provable, it was itself one of the provable statements it described, violating the ban and rendering itself unprovable. Yet if unprovable, it no longer was among the provable statements it described, complying with the ban and rendering itself provable once more. The logician then attempted a compendium of codices, which inflamed opinions further still. Expressing sincere concern the rift could fracture the order entirely, the correspondent concluded his letter. The absence of any later mention of the sect fostered the propagation of wild rumor and speculation until the third morning of the third week of the rites of the dancing shadows. 2 water-stained parchments had reached the emperor's advisor. One signed the mystagogue of mind, and the other by the theosophic thought. Both declared the renunciation of all oaths, offices, and obligations. The emperor pronounced the quest a most profound failure. He ordered the record to show that the Piesath had been lost at sea, the mystagogue in impenetrable desert, both fractally punished for the tumult they had wrought. All proposals to investigate further were thoroughly rejected, and the emperor declared searches for the order forbidden. I had remained true to the official account in my recently published collection of apologues, but the episode had maintained a vexing fixation over me. So it was with great interest that I came upon a discarded travelogue at some distant roadside inn, for contained within was the unraveling of our mystery. The log belonged to a chronometer who had heard of a monastic tradition which produced timepieces that affected time itself. He had won the audience of the order's high priestess, who propounded on the resolution of the troublesome contradictions which the previous correspondent had encountered. Soon after the rift, the order's founder decamped to the cliffs of Zeno, where she happened upon an itinerant artificer. The artificer proved quite insistent that he demonstrate for her his most precious possession. With great incredulity, she observed him bring forth 2 silvered glasses of exceptional clarity. Like all that is precious, he explained, the value lay not in the being, but the doing. He set the objects face to face. Within each glass now lived the other, and within that other, another, descending to infinity. The artificer tilted one glass, and the entire corridor of reflections shuddered and reformed. A reflection reflecting upon itself, reflecting. The ancients held that whosoever gazes upon the great fractals shall share of their wisdom. While the high priestess dismissed such mysticism, she conceded it was this vision which begat the great revelation. The Epimemedian had coaxed her system to reflect on itself, forcing an evolution from being to doing. A statement which claims itself false, if false, speaks of a true version of itself. That true version speaks of a false one. Within each version lives the other, descending to infinity. Her system existed not as fixed truth, but in perpetual flux. The high priestess boasted of the enlightenment attained through this revelation. Composers whose rising scales ended where they began. Actors who engraved themselves, engraving themselves. And a theosophan mystagogue whose selves emerged not from thinker or thought, but from the thinking. The log's entries then grew increasingly incomprehensible, which transfixed me all the more, compelling me to correct the conclusion as was recorded on this night of this week of this festival several years prior. My pen moved as if of its own accord until a completed folio lay in my hands. Contained within, the chronicle of a failure so profound it resembled victory.